Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome back. Vegas Take, hour number 3. Man, we are in 2020. It's incredible. Where did the decade go?
I can't believe we made it.
Where did the... Yeah, put your mic on. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I can't believe we made it. 2020?
I can't believe I made it.
It seems like it was yesterday. It was 1995.
You know, I've done the New Year's Eve thing on the Strip and all that stuff with all the drunken fools. But, you know, I'm kind of over that. I'm just getting old, man. I'm old. I'm not cool anymore. What can I say, man? My body's falling apart. You know, pretty soon I'm going to probably have to take blue pills. At least if you're taking blue pills, that means you're sexually active. I mean, as far as what Stein just told me in his personal life, he's not really sexually active, which is okay, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, but I feel for him. That's all. I feel for him. Anyway, welcome back to the show. A lot to get to still coming up in hour number 3. We're going to talk about this Gronkowski story and the reason why Steve Harvey is not very happy with him. It's really funny. We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. And, of course, the tragic passing of David Stern, former NBA commissioner. But I want to start with UNLV basketball. I've been very critical of UNLV basketball for a long time. I think it would be tough to find anyone else in Las Vegas in the media over the course of the last decade that has been more critical of the UNLV athletic department than myself, and I have no problem saying that. But one thing I'm always, at least I would like to think I am when it comes to UNLV, is fair. Mm-hmm. And when credit is due, I like to give credit to UNLV. I do. They have made some horrible decision-making as far as hiring coaches in the past decade. And there have not been a lot of positive things I've said about the program. One positive thing I did say about TJ Otzelberger, well, I've said a few positive things about him. First of all, when he was hired, I thought he did a great job in reaching out into the community and talking to people. And I thought he did a much better job of that than Marvin Menzies, that's for sure. I gave him a lot of credit for that, and he's been great to us. I gave him credit for something last week, and I think last week were they 4-8? I might be wrong on that, but I think their record was somewhere around 4-8. They lost some games, and he did something interesting that I think some coaches would not do. He took some players out of his starting lineup, some players that also, I guess, broken team rules, and he disciplined them as well. And particularly Amari Hardy. Amari Hardy was not playing some very good basketball. He's taking way too many shots. I think at times he was playing selfish. And the team itself, they just were not playing hard. So what does T.J. Otzelberger decide to do? He decides to, like I said, change up his starting lineup, sit some guys, even if it's for a few minutes, to set an example and say, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. I'm going to play a walk-on if you don't give me 110% out there. You have to dive for loose balls. He talked a lot about effort. And I said on the air last week, I said, even though I think from a coaching perspective, wins and losses, he's underachieving thus far, I said I give him a lot of respect and credit for doing something like that because, as I said, I think there are other coaches that would not have done that. Sitting out your best player is something that is, I think it's commendable because it sets an example. And he did it at a good time, too.
Is Hardy their best player?
Yes, I no question. I think Hardy is their best player. I really do believe that. We could debate that, but that's not really the debate I'm getting into. I'm getting into the debate of, why they played so well last night.
Yes.
So last night, Utah State comes to town at the Thomas and Mack Center. This is a team that was favored to win the Mountain West.
They'll be one of the top 2 teams in the conference, right?
Yeah, and they were a top 25 team at one point. They had a couple losses. They lost to BYU. I think they have two losses.
St. Mary's as well.
Yeah. Two pretty good basketball teams, by the way. There's nothing embarrassing about that. They have Sam Merrill, who is the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year last year. Their best player, though, was hurt.
Yep, Ketta was out.
Yeah, so
the big man.
So I said before the game started, and by the way, I thought Utah State was going to win the game, but I said, and Chris, you could attest to this, because hours before the game, I said if there's any game that UNLV can come away with an upset, this would be the game. And the reason why was because Sam Merrill was not healthy. And as I said, their best player, their starting center, NBA prospect, did not play. But what I saw from UNLV last night, and some people are going to be surprised to hear me say this, in my personal opinion, was the best defensive effort. And I use the term effort. It's very important. Full 40 minutes I have seen from a UNLV basketball team since Lon Kruger. Now, I understand over Dave Rice, when they had Dave Rice, they beat the number 1 team in the country, but that really wasn't because of their defensive effort. They just made every single shot imaginable, and it was just one of those games where they caught North Carolina on a bad night. This was one of those games where they earned the victory because of their work, because of their defense. It wasn't their offense that won the game. It was their defense, and it was collective. And I thought Amari Hardy, even though when you look at his stats, You're not going to say, look, he's had plenty of games where he scored 25 points, right? He scored 30. I mean, he's had some big games. But to me, this was his best basketball game. And the reason why I say that is because of what he did on both ends of the floor, particularly on the defensive end. I don't recall him ever taking a bad shot. He created for his teammates. He did an unbelievable job on Sam Merrill. And so did a couple other guys, by the way, because there were a lot of mixing and matching with putting guys on Merrill. And I asked Amari Hardy after the game, I said, some of the decision-making, that your coach has made in regards to holding players accountable and not starting specific players like yourself, do you think that was a factor? And he gave me a great answer. And he said, absolutely. Coach did he sent a message to us, and we took that message and we brought it to the game tonight. Like I said, I give credit where credit is due. This is a big win for UNLV. And the reason why I say it's a big win, because they don't have any big wins this year. This is a big in-conference win for them. It's a win that when you look at March, hopefully they're not in the play-in game. Hopefully they're not playing San Diego State in the quarterfinals. This is the type of win that you could look back on, a couple months down the road and say, wow, that win was really monumental. It was a big win. Yes, you caught Utah State on a bad night. Yes, Utah State was awful. I think it was a 50-50 thing. UNLV's defense and their energy was fantastic. I also think Utah State was extremely flat, and it would probably be their worst played game of the year. But you have to give UNLV credit for putting themselves in that position to force Utah State into a lot of bad shots, so on and so forth. Now, it's a lot of positives, and I don't think I've said that many positives about UNLV football or basketball in a really, really long time. Like I said, since Lon Kruger was here. Now, with that said, here's what I'm going to say on the other side of this. And I know I'm being very long-winded here. I apologize. But it's one game. And this game will not mean much, if anything, if they do not defeat Air Force this weekend. Now, they came with the intensity, and TJ said it yesterday. It is my job. If this is UNLV basketball, and that's what he said, then they have to, have that sort of intensity every game because they are offensively challenged at times. They have to have that intensity on the defensive end to be successful. They certainly had it last night. The intensity has picked up. I give them credit for that. This was like, it's funny because I see Kevin Kruger on the sidelines, and I said to myself, this is his father's defense tonight, what they're doing. They're attacking. They're going after loose balls. They must have gotten every single 50-50 ball last night. That was Lon Kruger defense, and it was really fun to see, and I really enjoyed watching that. I really did. So kudos to UNLV, but like I said, it's one game. It's only one game in conference, and what really matters is consistency. But it was a great win for UNLV, and I'm really happy for TJ. And it was great to see, and I hope more fans show up to the game over the weekend, but it was great to see a real true team victory. And to me, one of the best defensive efforts, like I said, since the Lon Kruger days. Gentlemen, take over from there. Sorry if I was long-winded.
No, it was only about 26 and a half minutes. I'd like to hear about 5 more if you got it, Brian. I don't even want to talk. Can you keep going? Is that possible?
That was an impressive streak right there.
That was really good. No, you mentioned how they caught him on a bad day. I would say that would be the case if they didn't actually dominate them. They won by 17 points, Brian. When you catch a team on a bad day, like when UNLV beat that North Carolina team you were talking about, what was that score? What, they won by 3 points?
But JD, they were like 3 for 15 from 3. Utah State's not going to shoot that poorly.
They're actually 2 of 19 from 3.
Yeah, 2 of 19.
Yeah. They were terrible from 3. But do you think that Marvin Coleman is one of the reasons why? Defensively, because I think he's actually a pretty decent defensive player.
I think Marvin Coleman is a very good athlete. And by the way, if you don't know who Marvin Coleman is, he is a walk-on at UNLV.
He is.
And he is one of the guys that TJ has started. In fact, he got more minutes than Amari Hardy in a few games over the course of the last several games. You know what I think? You know what I think it is, JD? I think it's contagious. I think they see this kid on the floor. They see his work ethic. Apparently, I haven't been to one of the practices, but
he's a Vegas local. He's a sophomore. He's undersized, but he's very athletic.
But what they say is that he is the hardest worker in practice. I remember the late Bryce Dijon-Jones, a tragedy, former UNLV player who was shot and killed. Just a horrible, horrible story. And he had actually just signed an NBA deal. But the reason why I bring up Bryce Dijon-Jones, former Rebel, is this. I used to go to a lot of the practices that Lon Kruger, when Lon Kruger was here. And Bryce Jones was one of those guys where, man, he just gave it all in practice. He was just one of the hardest workers I've ever seen in any practice, in any situation. He was so competitive, and I think it showed in these games. And he was just a tenacious defender.
So, do you think that?
And the reason why I bring that up is because I just see that work ethic in this kid, and I think it's contagious. I think if you see one guy putting forth that kind of effort, then it kind of like moves on to other players. I think Amari Hardy has turned over. I think he's turned over a new leaf with Amari Hardy.
Well, Hardy had an interesting game. Usually you look at his stat sheet, you don't see 14, 6, 4, and 3. 3 being steals, 6 being he never gets 6 assists. He might get 2 or 3 assists. He usually shoots the ball about 20 times a game. That didn't happen. But you really think that Neemias Queta is a 17-point difference maker? You think if he plays that game, they win?
Here's what I think happens.
There's a combination of a lot of reasons why Utah State lost that basketball game last night. Brian, you hit on a lot of the points. But, shooting-wise, Utah State was nowhere near what you would expect out of that team. So, to JD's point, I think there's a lot of factors. It wasn't just the fact of one player not being able to perform up to par, or one player playing great on UNLV's side. It was a combination of things that took place.
I think it's kind of a bad matchup for Utah State, too. They're not overly athletic. They're big. Sam Merrill's 6'5", 220, but he's not the best athlete. He's a good athlete, but he's not a great athlete.
Sam Merrill's 6'5"?
He's 6'5",
He
yeah.
is 6'5",
He is
God,
6'5".
he doesn't look 6'5".
Yeah. Because he's got this slender build. That's why.
He's probably 6'5",
he looks like he'd be like a
180.
6'2", 6'3 type of guy, but that's not
To answer
really
your
what
question, yes, I think it was a huge factor that you're arguably your best player who's an
17 points.
Okay, well, let me answer. I think that it was a big factor. Now, saying that it was the only factor would be ridiculous, but it was absolutely a big factor. You know who else was a big factor? Mbake. He was fantastic.
What about
yesterday.
Bryce Hamilton, 9 for 11,
Bryce,
22?
listen, it was a team effort. Everyone did their job. And we hear Bill Belichick with the Patriots throughout his entire coaching career talk about it all the time. Do your job.
Right.
This was a complete team win. It wasn't one guy.
What I'm getting at here is that, okay, Queta didn't play. They didn't make their shots, but you're kind of making it seem like they just caught him on a bad day. Again, I would agree if it was a 5-point win. They won by...
I said that was a part of it. I didn't say that was the whole...
They won by 17 points, and I think had Queta played...
I just did 10 minutes giving UNLV credit. What are you talking about?
I got you. I think had Queta played, UNLV would still win that game because they have a major athleticism advantage, especially at guard.
I disagree. I think if Utah State is healthy, UNLV does not win that basketball game. I don't care how good their effort is. Sam Merrill is not 100%. He's had ankle issues. He's got wrist issues. Those are their top 2 players. You've got one of your players that is completely out of the lineup. Sam Merrill, I'm not sure he even attempted a shot in the second half. That is not the Sam Merrill that we know. He is the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year last year, so I disagree with you.
And Joan Antonio's back, but he didn't play well. He went 2 for 8 from 3.
Okay, but
he didn't play great.
I disagree with you in this. The bottom line here, guys, let's not overthink this. Utah State is by far a better basketball team. I'm sorry, they are. They caught Utah State on a bad night, and UNLV deserved to win because of their defensive effort and their intensity. I give them all the credit in the world for that. But on a neutral floor, you're telling me that UNLV wins more than maybe 2 out of 10? No, I just don't. I just don't see it that way. I don't think UNLV is that good. I think they're, as I said at the beginning of the year, and I'm not going to change my stance, they are at best a middle-of-the-road Mountain West Conference team that at best, if they're lucky, gets into the semifinals of the Mountain West Conference tournament and does not get a postseason invite. That's my personal opinion. I'm sticking by it. With that being said, I give them all the credit in the world for a fantastic game last night. It was nice to see the team effort.
And Brian, just like you, I was in the building last night, and I've seen a lot of UNLV basketball, right, for the past 15 years. In this town. That was one of the more impressive efforts defensively from a defensive intensity standpoint that I've seen since Lon Kruger was the head coach here at UNLV. And then, of course, in the post-game press conference, you brought up a very interesting point, didn't you, Brian, with respect to Amari Hardy and the psyche of this team and how things have changed here in the basically in the past couple of weeks. Right. You mentioned the record that they were 4-8. They are now 7-8. Obviously, a 3.3 game winning streak and beating one of the better teams in the Mountain West. Albeit, yes, they're beat down.
13 and they didn't play well at all. Utah State,
a 13 state Utah team. So, but Brian, I think you should point out what exactly you asked Amari Hardy and how much of a factor that is as far as the locker room in what transpired last night against Utah State.
Yeah, I asked him in the press conference the fact that TJ Otzelberger has not started him the last couple of games. In fact, he did start last night, but the fact that he hasn't, I said, was that a factor in giving you a little bit more motivation to just play harder? I think that was around the...
Basically, that was the gist of it.
And I loved his answer.
There's a change in mentality, right, of
I loved
this team.
I loved his answer.
That is what took place last night, JD and Brian, right, in that game. That was a different basketball team from a mentality standpoint than we have been used to with this team, even in the season. Look, we're talking about a team that is 15 games into the season. Okay, it's not necessarily early on in the season, but we have an idea of what the makeup of this team is from a basketball standpoint, but from a mentality standpoint, it is obviously changed, right, Brian? I mean, it's not the same team that they were 5 games ago.
I guess the question I asked and his answer was quoted in the Review Journal, so I actually found the quote that Hardy's response to me was this in regards to not starting him and trying to motivate him to play a little bit harder and get the team. Here's what he said. He said, quote, "As a coach, that's what you're supposed to do. He's creating a culture. It's his first year, and that's something you want to do. If I was the coach, I would have done the same thing. You want players accountable. It definitely showed tonight." That I think the team has turned over a new leaf. I was worried a few weeks ago that maybe he lost the team. You heard all these guys breaking team rules and all this other stuff. But the fact that Hardy is respecting his coach, I think that goes a long way.
And that's what it comes down to is respect. He is earning the respect of his players, and soon he's going to earn the respect of his fans. That's something Marvin Menzies never did. He was their friend. He was not their superior.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with
that. Being said, guys, we have covered UNLV basketball a long time, especially Brian and I right here in town. Mm-hmm. We still got to see them come to play on Saturday against Air Force.
And they
have to come.
They had
play.
17 turnovers. Air Force doesn't turn the ball over. Probably not. They're much more athletic. Again, Utah State is not athletic at guard. Air Force is athletic at guard. UNLV they still fouled 21 times. Utah State shot 25 free throws, by the way, and they still lost by 17. I'm just shocked by the margin of victory. Again, I get, and I've said this 3 times, I get a 1, a 2, a 3, even a 5-point loss. But 17 points, that is domination.
You know the deal, JD. You know why, right? It was because you mentioned it. 2-19 from 3. Okay, you shoot 2-19 from 3. I think they thought they shoot 33% total from the field. Utah State. That is going to be a remedy for you getting beat by double digits.
And speaking of the Mountain West, San Diego State beats Fresno State by 9. They are 16-0, undefeated. One of 2 teams in the NCAA to be undefeated. The other one is Auburn.
And what did I say 3 weeks ago when absolutely nobody was talking about San Diego State, JD? Nobody was talking about San Diego State a month ago. Nobody was saying they were a nationally ranked team. I watched them play a couple games at the Orleans where they just beat up Creighton and they beat up a really good Illinois team. And I said, let me tell you something, man. This team is legit. They are a top 25 team in the country. They're better than Utah State. Well, guess what? Now they're ranked 13th in the country. They're ranked ahead of Kentucky and teams like Michigan State. I'm telling you, nobody thought that was going to happen. They got this kid Flynn, a transfer, a guard who is incredible. They've got guys down low that have NBA ability, NBA talent, and then they got guys like Mitchell coming off the bench who I think could also play at the next level somewhere, be paid to play basketball somewhere. Dutch and San Diego State, they are stacked. They have a stacked basketball team. With that being said, I don't know what's going to happen Saturday night. They go to Utah State. Utah State's not healthy. Sam Merrill does not look like the Sam Merrill that we know. I don't know how this Utah State can defeat San Diego State. I think it's a horrible matchup for them. Horrible.
What is it, in 3 days now Kenta's going to be healthy and ready to roll out there on Saturday?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
We talked about Sam Merrill and his physical issues.
Yeah.
I don't see how, Utah State from a physical standpoint is going to get he's going to get so much better here in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And they're going to be a popular play too. There's going to be a lot of money on Utah State in this situation because
you think so?
Oh, absolutely. They're thinking, they just got beat by UNLV.
They'll be irate because of it.
Lowly
Yeah.
UNLV. Now they're at home, and I think San Diego State wins that game by 10 as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think San Diego State. I've said that last night. I don't know how Utah State wins that game.
But Mensa might be out for Saturday.
They're still stacked.
Steve Fisher, who? Steve Fisher, who? Brian Dutcher handled his business down there at San Diego State.
Well, there's nothing better than when we enter March Madness. We have so many college basketball tournaments in Las Vegas. And by the way, Gonzaga is going to be coming to town. How good is the West Coast Conference this year?
Oh, man.
The West Coast Conference might be as good as it's been in a decade this year. You have St. Mary's. St. Mary's pretty good. Yeah. BYU probably has their coach over at BYU since they fired Rose, who I never thought was a great coach. This guy who took over is doing a fantastic job. BYU is an NCAA tournament team. I'm going to tell you, BYU, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you look at that West Coast Conference tournament, this is a different BYU team. They're not intimidated by anybody. They could give Gonzaga a competitive basketball game.
Man, I don't know. Gonzaga, they've won their last 5 games by an average of 33 points. They're favored.
Well, they're very good.
Granted, they're on the road at Portland tonight, but they're favored by 24. I'm actually looking at Portland in that game, but Gonzaga has a ton of talent. They've got Adam Gilder, who transferred from Texas A&M. They've got Kispert. I mean, they've got probably 3 or 4 NBA players on that team. But I agree, BYU will probably play them relatively close. But the Gonzagas, I mean, they legitimately have they're in the conversation as the top team in the country.
But I bring up these tournaments. It's not just the West Coast Conference. Obviously, we have the Mountain West Conference tournament at the Thomas and Mack Center. When all this is going on, the Pac-12 tournament is also here at T-Mobile Arena. We also have the WAC. I mean, it's insane how many postseason basketball tournaments.
Well, it's a basketball mecca that time of year. There's no question here in Las Vegas. But specifically the West Coast Conference, you guys brought it up. I mean, yes, we're talking about there is a separation, right, Brian and JD, when it comes to Gonzaga and the other teams in the West Coast Conference. Yes, we're talking about a couple of those other schools that are good basketball teams, but Gonzaga is a legitimate national championship contender.
I don't think there's any question about that. But, again, quickly going back to UNLV real quick. I don't. If they play with that type of intensity, which I think is very difficult to sustain, but if they can play with that type of intensity on both ends of the floor, particularly on the defensive end of the floor, yeah, I think they could squeeze into maybe the 4th or 5th in conference. I think that's doable. That's possible. I think it's wide open in the middle of the conference. Obviously, the top 2 teams, and it's everyone else looking at them, is Utah State and San Diego State. I truly believe in
and Nevada. I think Nevada's actually better than Utah State right now.
Steve Alford, I tell you, Steve Alford's doing a fantastic job.
I know a ton of talent.
I know he's struggled at UCLA, but as soon as they hired him at UNR, I said that is a fantastic hire for a number of different reasons. Number 1, he's a name. Number 2, he can recruit. Number 3, look what he did at New Mexico. By the way, New Mexico lost to San Jose State last night.
Oh, wow.
Are you kidding me? San Jose State, a lot of people feel like they shouldn't even have a basketball program, and New Mexico goes in there and they lose. By the way, one of Marvin Menzies' protege assistant coaches struggling mightily, and he did not have a good year last year either. How the hell did San Jose State win that game? I don't know. But again, UNLV has a chance with the talent that they have, if coached properly, if they play with the intensity they had last night. I see no reason why they can't be 4th or 5th in conference. And that's what I said. I said, give yourself a chance for an NIT berth. Give yourself a chance for postseason, which I think would be a phenomenal feat in year 1. I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think they're good enough, regardless of coaching, regardless of that sort of thing. I just don't think they're a good enough basketball team to get there. But the way they played last night has me thinking, maybe they're not a play-in game type team in the Mountain West Conference tournament. Maybe they won't have to play San Diego State or a Utah State in the first round if they play with the intensity they showed last night.
And it wasn't just about the defensive side of the ball. We talked a lot about the defensive side of the ball with the Runner Rebels. Right? Last night, offensively, they got it going too as well. Bryce Hamilton, a nice game. He ends up with 20 points in the game. He had his mid-range game going, as well as some flashy plays also. Of course, JD brought up the stat line with Amari Hardy, and Amari Hardy is going to have to be a big key for them offensively throughout the entire season for them to be relevant in the Mountain West. But how about Mbake Jong last night, Brian? How about the performance he put on?
Yeah, that was
from a defensive standpoint. He was looking Elijah-esque out there at points.
He had 10, 14, and 4. I would actually argue that Mbake Jong is the best player on UNLV right now because of his defensive effectiveness.
That was just indicative of UNLV's performance last night. Mbake, he gets hurt. He's down on the ground.
That was crazy, wasn't it?
And then 5 minutes later, he's back on the floor. That kid's tough. And as TJ said yesterday, he is kind of the heart and soul of that team.
He's also averaging a double-double this year.
Yep. JD, he was coming off the court, right, and his head was down. It was like somebody shot him when he was we thought for sure he might have been done for the season, if not for the game.
Mm-hmm. So congratulations to UNLV. We could continue. Hopefully they get the W. Hopefully they get the W against Air Force this weekend, because if you lose to Air Force, then you say, well, that game might have been a little meaningless. You got to take care of business against a pretty well-coached Air Force team. Those kids play really hard. If you want to talk about intensity, they're very fundamentally sound. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, word came out yesterday, a brain hemorrhage. We knew that David Stern had a brain hemorrhage. We didn't know how serious it was. The former NBA commissioner has died at the age of 77. Very sad. There's a lot of mixed feelings, emotions, and statements on social media and on television about David Stern. I'll explain what those are, my feelings on David Stern, his legacy on the game of basketball. We'll explain that and much, much more. And again, I keep teasing this. We're going to get to this coming up, I promise you. Gronkowski, on national TV on New Year's Eve, he did something that got Steve Harvey very, very upset. It has nothing to do with dating his daughter, wrecking a car, or anything like that, I promise you. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to The Vegas Take right here on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDAWN.
Sean Hannity, weekdays noon to 3 p.m. Now back to the Vegas Take on 101.5 FM, 720 AM. KDON.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take. Sharp and Shapiro. A little Muse, right? A little Muse action. Welcome back to the show on a Thursday. And by the way, tomorrow on the show, they are known as, well, I guess you could call them pot professionals, right? Is that a fair claim? I don't know. Sierra Riddle and Zarilla Bacon are going to be coming on the show tomorrow.
Ladies of the cannabis industry,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Is that the technical definition?
Pot professionals, also known as ladies of the cannabis. Yes.
Very, very well integrated and known in the cannabis industry, and they happen to be female.
So a lot of questions to ask them about obviously the benefits of marijuana.
And one of them is a very, very highly decorated chef.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, well, Chris Wynn would definitely enjoy that.
I would be all over that.
As would I. But anyway, they're going to be joining us in studio on the show tomorrow, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I mentioned this earlier. Sad story. Former NBA Commissioner David Stern has passed away. He had a brain hemorrhage last week. I want to get Oscar Goodman on the show, former mayor of Las Vegas. He had a personal relationship with David Stern, sometimes not the greatest, but Stern was responsible for bringing the Las Vegas NBA All-Star weekend here, and Oscar Goodman obviously was a big part of that. So we'll get Oscar on to talk about that eventually. But my interactions with David Stern were very limited. I had one interview with him that was during NBA All-Star weekend, and I got about 10 minutes with him. I was working for another station at the time. He was just, I just found him to be very respectful, but at the same time, very anti-Vegas, in this sense, anti-gambling. And that made me dislike him for that because, we're trying to get a franchise here, right? Keep in mind, that was when we didn't have the Raiders coming to town. We didn't have a professional hockey team. We didn't have the Aces. We didn't have a soccer team. All we had was UNLV, and we were dying to get a professional franchise here, right? So that made me dislike the man. And, I've had a lot of people over the years that have worked with him within the industry said that he was difficult to work with at times, a bit egotistical. And then I've had other people say, listen, he was a decent guy. He had his personality traits that maybe some people didn't like. But listen, make no mistake about it. First of all, this guy completely turned around the NBA. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is this. When he took over as the commissioner, the NBA was struggling from a financial standpoint. He made great decisions, made a few bad ones too, but made the majority of great decisions that really turned the NBA and helped pave the way to what it is today, which is very entertaining and very popular. So he left his mark on the NBA. It wasn't just the NBA, though. Everybody in the WNBA should be sending condolences because David Stern is the reason why the WNBA exists. It is the reason why you can go to a Las Vegas Aces game with your family at a reasonable price and watch good women's basketball. It is the reason why women are able to be paid to play basketball in the United States of America. David Stern is the one that started that. Listen, David Stern was an extremely intelligent guy. Make no mistake about it. He probably knew that the WNBA was not going to be a moneymaker, but he also knew that women deserved their role to be professional players, and this gave them that platform. And the NBA is making enough money where we can support the WNBA, and also you do something like that, bring some of those female fans maybe to the NBA. So I think it was smart on his part to do that. He's the reason why the WNBA exists. He is a good reason, besides the players, a good reason why the NBA is so successful now. As to when he took it over, it was in shambles. He also made, and I thought this was a great rule that he put in place, to make sure that the players dress appropriately if they're not playing. You can't show up in a wife beater and shorts and sandals to an NBA game. Remember that controversy, but he made sure that there was attire that would be put in place to make sure that certain clothes you cannot wear and certain clothes you have to wear. It was those type of things that he implemented, and some of the players didn't like it. But I think you had to respect this man. You didn't always have to agree with him, but you had to respect David Stern. So he will be sorely missed at the age of 77. He was a good man. He might, he might have had personality traits that maybe some people didn't like. He certainly made his mark in basketball, and he did a lot of good things for the game of basketball. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts, your reflections of David Stern?
There's no question that the impact on the NBA is a big part of David Stern's legacy. He started in the NBA as a general counsel member, and then, of course, he ended taking over in 1984. He came into the NBA as the commissioner in 84. It was already starting to improve. And what I mean by that is that, of course, that was back in 1979, 1980. was when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came into the league, and that was kind of the beginning of the makeover. Back then, back in the late 70s, JD and Brian, the NBA, a lot of it was on tape delay. There was a lot of issues in the NBA that were unresolved, whether it be drug issues that were plaguing the league. It was a league that had a bad image. And then David Stern took over as commissioner, and it started to improve immensely. Also, you brought up a lot of the accolades, Brian, regarding David Stern. He is also responsible greatly for the globalization of the NBA and it being popular all over the world, bringing in having it be a league that's receptive to players from other countries, and that has been a huge factor for the NBA, making it the behemoth that it is on a global level. So that's another thing that we need to credit David Stern with from perspective of being commissioner of the NBA. But there's no question, you brought it up. It was a league that was just plagued with a lot of issues that was not making money. It was a league that was not thriving by any stretch of
Let me
the
ask you guys this, though. What do you think was his biggest?
Was a big factor.
What do you think was his biggest issue? Because he faced a lot of issues. Was it the malice at the palace? Was it the gambling issue with Tim Donaghy? He faced a lot of difficult situations throughout his tenure as NBA commissioner. What do you think was one of his most difficult ones? Because I think there's plenty.
I don't know about the malice of the palace. That was a kind of an outlier thing that you don't want to happen in any league, right? You don't want any type of violent activity like that. Once, I don't know. It's a good question, actually, as far as what was the biggest. Are you saying like the biggest
down.
Controversy he had to deal with, or like the?
I would say it was gambling, hands down.
It was. I don't think there's any question about that.
See, this is the thing.
It's tied to Vegas because it's
and that's the reason why he was so anti-gambling. But no, Donaghy actually, he's come on our show a couple of times, and he actually said something very, very unkind about Stern last time he was on the show. But he said that he believes that Stern was actively involved himself, and he had officials who were on the take, connected to it's different types of mobs across. But I think what David Stern did the best for basketball was he understood that it was a fun game. That he like the big dunks, the highlight reels, the Michael Jordan, the NBA draft really got a lot of publicity after Stern came on board. ESPN, those major TV deals. He understood how to market the NBA much better, and a big part of it was the fact that cleaning up the image. Iverson did his thing and with the shorts and stuff, but you're right. But before the players were forced to wear nice attire to games, you didn't really know, and I think it was difficult for fans to relate to the players before that, and then they weren't looked at as professionals. But he said, "Hey, you guys are professionals. You guys are making, and it wasn't hundreds of millions, but you guys are making millions of dollars right now. You need to get a couple of nice suits." Whenever you travel, and they traveled first class, they traveled in planes. I mean, I just think he really understood how to make the NBA much more acceptable to a much larger national and, as you stated, international audience.
Let me just go back to the interview that I did with him, and I should have got that. I think I still have that audio. So I interviewed him during NBA All-Star Weekend, and I asked him about the gambling, and I said, Mr. Stern, about getting a franchise here, and he told me how concerned he was about gambling, and I looked at him and I said, you do realize that you can walk anywhere in Las Vegas and gamble on NBA games, right? And he looked at me and says, yes, I understand that. Then I said, then what's the difference? I said, what's the difference between gambling on a game here in Las Vegas and gambling on games throughout the country? He didn't really give me an answer on that. Mm-hmm. And I think he was uneducated is the best word when it came. Now, obviously he's a very educated, smart guy, but he was not educated when it came to gambling. He didn't understand that you can bet illegally offshore. And I said, listen, you do understand that if you're in another state, right? If you're in L.A., if you're in Boston, because he made it like, no, you can't gamble on games outside of Las Vegas. Now, legally, he was right, but what he didn't understand was the bookie stuff, the bookie situation, and back
the illegal gambling.
You can bet. You can bet.
One thing, Adam Silver.
I don't know if it's uneducated, guys. It's probably defiant, right? Mm-hmm. That's the word I'd probably use for David Stern.
He thought it was taboo
because he
just
knew
like
about
a lot of
it.
people
He
did.
knows.
But I think that one thing Adam Silver recognizes the fact that probably 60% of sports fans gamble on sports. And if you have legalized gambling, your ratings are going to go up. I mean, look at the NFL. Despite the fact that they have all this controversy and the product isn't that great right now, ratings are as high as they've ever been this year because sports betting is legalized in 17 or 18 more states.
Yeah.
And Stern, he just didn't. I don't think he really understood how many people that are watching religiously the NBA are wagering on it.
What he did understand and what he did very, very well was to maximize finances and how to make the NBA a great business model and product, and he should be looked up to for that, and also what he did for women's basketball.
Well, and how many expansion teams?
Yeah.
Did he bring in? Was it
sure.
it 6?
Plenty.
He brought in a lot. Yes.
I mean, the Magic,
Toronto Raptors,
the Raptors, the Grizzlies.
He did a lot of. The point I'm trying to make is, while at times he did some things that were controversial, not everybody agreed with him, the man did a lot for basketball.
I would say he did more good than bad.
Absolutely, he did.
Sure.
I agree.
doubt.
I agree.
Yeah.
And they got a great commissioner now, by the way. But David Stern, sadly, will be missed. Lost his life, passed away at the age of 77. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I've been teasing this story. I'm looking forward to talking about it. Gronkowski, New Year's Eve, pissing off Steve Harvey live on national television. We have the audio to play for you coming back, and it involves a Lego set. Yeah, really bizarre situation. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with that right after this. You are listening to the Vegas Take right here on the all-new 101.5 FM 720 AM KDAWN.
Mark Levin, weekdays 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Now back to the Vegas Take on 101.5 FM 720 AM KDAWN.
All right, welcome back. Wrapping up a Thursday. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. Glad you could join us. By the way, I did mention some of those guests we will have on the air tomorrow. But since our producer is here, why doesn't he do the job for me once in a while? You know, I mean, Jason, why don't you preview the show?
He's a busy guy,
Mr.
Brian.
Stein?
He's got a lot of stuff he's got to do. He just can't be rolling
First of
in
all,
here and
why
doing
is your
segments every
chair?
once in a while.
Why you look like you're sitting in a high chair? By the way,
Yeah.
it's really bizarre. Your mic is near where your belly button is. You just look. You always look. Why do you always look so awkward when you come in studio? You just look really weird. Like why? I don't know what is going on.
I'm actually very okay with it.
Here we go. Okay,
It's
here
like,
we go. There we go.
You would think you've never done radio
Someone messed
before.
with these chairs while we were on vacation, I think.
Oh, is that? Well, so you want to
sabotage.
You never.
I know
You're
who it
just.
was.
You know. This is why I compare you to
I won't
Donald
say
Trump.
who it is.
You never take responsibility for your own actions. You sound like Donald Trump.
I'm
Take
just sitting in that chair
responsibility.
that's up a little too
Oh,
high. Okay, I didn't do anything criminal.
Wow.
Well, here's the deal, Brian. You're
Anyway.
the one that pointed it out. There's no responsibility for something you pointed out.
I mean, you know,
No responsibility.
adjust yourself.
Just
That's all.
because it bothers you doesn't mean it bothers me, Chris, Kelso, or Campbell.
I don't care what you guys think. All that matters is what I think.
Right.
That's all I care about, and it bothers me. So that's all that
And I'm
matters.
happy that I got you to admit that.
Listen, I'll tell you what. When we go to TGI Fridays tonight, I'll get you a high chair. All
Are
right?
we going
I
to
promise.
TGA Friday?
Yeah,
Wait,
yeah.
what?
I'll pay for your Sesame
Listen,
Jack chicken strips.
It must be the time of the show where you're out of things to say. 'Cause
Those
that's
are
when
so
you That's
good.
when you invite
Oh,
me in.
trust me, my
to make-
friend.
I
That's
like
the time
that.
when you invite me in to make
Trust
fun of me.
Running out of content.
Trust me, my friend, when you come in studio, I always have something
Yep.
to say, and I usually bite my tongue because if I ever go any personal route, I'll never hear the end of
No,
it from
he's-
him.
I
And his
think-
father's listening, and his wife is probably listening, so I will never hear the end of it. So no.
I think you're definitely running out of content right now, and you are trying to create content at the
That's right.
expense of our
That's right.
of
What was
our-
that Ralph
of
Tresvant
our
song?
producer,
Sensitivity.
and your so-called
man.
friend.
He's called so-called friend who wrecks my car and doesn't tell me about it.
He's
Yeah,
still
what a
not
wonderful.
over that. You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. 'cause
please do.
We do have a couple of loose ends to tie up before we went on vacation.
You're making it like we're married. Thank
One,
God. What are you talking about?
So speaking of the car, listeners of the show know that I was parking Brian's car for him, and I misjudged the parking lot I was in, and I may have scraped very lightly against
you
the
mean you
pole.
may have?
There's no may have, right? It's
You
a
damaged
it's a
my
definite,
car, you
yeah.
fool.
All the facts are still not in here.
Hey, buffoon! You
I'm waiting for
caused
the I'm waiting
$500
for the surveillance camera. 'cause
caused
there's a
five-
chance that I didn't do it.
You caused
But anyway.
$500 worth of damage to my car,
So-
you buffoon.
Okay, so first of all, the $500 quote that's
Yes.
coming from his neighbor who apparently works on cars. He's got I don't know what his
Okay. Well, they
qualifications
both saw
are.
the damage, so
Not
they can
even a
attest to
We're
it.
valid
talking about a
source,
couple
huh?
scrapes and a little anyway.
Uh-huh.
So Brian made a deal with me. Okay, he said, "Look, I won't make you pay this $500 to get my car
Right.
repaired if you do the following:
And quit your job.
take me out to lunch at Carl's Jr.
Yeah, which was $10.
which I spent $11.83 on his meal.
Wow.
Because he kept adding on. He goes, no, you know what? I want the big Carl, and I want some cookies to go with that, and I want the large fry, and I
Can
want
you
the large.
believe-
So it wasn't just like a normal meal at Carl's Jr. It was like a lot of food.
The super
They didn't
duper
finish.
special.
They
The
didn't finish.
super duper.
Right, because he wanted to
edition.
stick it to me. So
He
spent
wanted
about
the Uncle
$12
Carl.
on
If I
food.
wanted to stick it to you, I would have given you the price for the damage, you fool. Yeah, I made you pay fast food. What do you mean I wanted
The
to
other
stick
thing he
it to you?
forced me to do is while he was in Connecticut, he forced me to take his car to the Firestone and have the oil changed in his car. So I had to take his car in. I had to sit there in the little waiting room and read the old magazines while they put the oil in his car.
So would you rather have spent 4 or 5?
And then I had to return his car to the parking lot, and it was like a whole ordeal.
What a chore.
It took up like my whole afternoon.
Well, here's some advice for you,
it was
Stein.
like 2 hours of my day.
Here's some advice for you. If you don't want to get a friend's oil change, here's what we forget about this story. You didn't tell me you got the car into you didn't crash the car. You weren't honest with me about it. Next time you take somebody's property, let me tell you something. If I borrowed one of your DVDs and I scratched your DVD, I would have told you about it. You scratched my car.
Who watches DVDs?
You get the point I'm trying to make, okay?
You come up with something more current?
Okay, well,
What is
here's
this, 1997?
Here's something current.
I scratched your DVD.
Here's something current. Go back to the DMV and get your driver's license over again because I don't think you know how to drive a car. That's what. Speaking. Okay, so fine.
I've explained it. Okay.
Right. Well, thank you
Couldn't
for
figure out how to make your seat go up, and then the car's longer than mine. I
It's
don't
not
have that
my
rear
fault
view
you're
camera.
4
I don't
feet
have that,
tall.
I'll
That
be
fancy
honest,
rear
it
view
just-
camera that I've become accustomed to.
It just sounds to me like Brian's a really bad businessman. You just cost yourself about $400 there, bro.
Yeah, I am. I'm a bad judgment of character
Well,
too
here's
because
the
I
thing.
call
He
my
doesn't
friend.
really care. He's not going to get it repaired. He doesn't really care about the damage.
Now-
This car, even with the little
doesn't
tiny bit of
care.
scratches on it, is so much better than the car he used to have.
Oh my gosh,
that
it's not
it
even in the
doesn't
same
it doesn't-
stratosphere,
he
my
used
friend.
to have like rotting omelets, he had omelets and prime rib
People.
and people
Yeah.
in the back seat of
Hey,
that car.
So do you think
So
that
this is like
I think
is
Jimmy Hoffa was under the seat.
Possibly.
There's a couple other missing pieces
let's
there.
say hypothetically that Brian's next door neighbor, that none of this happened, and he made you pay the $500, and then the quote was right. Do you think that Brian would have double dipped and taken a piece from his next door neighbor as a referral fee?
he would have done something. He would have done something to enrich
You
himself.
know, you guys are trying to personally attack me for
I'm not
this.
sure what.
Let me just explain. Hold on a second. Let me just.
I think he would have taken
no,
15%.
hold on a second. Okay,
He would have
somebody.
taken 500, then gone to a place that would have charged
they're
him.
going
That
after-
campaign recommended that
they're
would have
going
charged
after-
200, and then he would have pocketed
All right.
300 or
I
something.
was getting fired up for a Gronk and Steve Harvey
yeah, we
story
gotta
here,
get
and
to that.
this
Okay.
got
We have to get to
sidetracked
that.
In
into
closing,
So he would have taken the
Speaking of
300.
destroying
back and
things.
so JD
And
continues the conversation.
He would have
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
300, gone with campaign, took 2 girls out, spent $150
Yeah.
a piece on them at your expense.
That's elaborate, but I could see it happening.
I
think
could
so,
easily
too.
see that transpiring. Yes,
Right.
JD. I could.
Okay.
That
so-
definitely sounds right to me.
Yeah.
Steve Harvey, you want me to set this up, or do you guys?
You're not going to end this. I'm just going
Okay.
to. I'm going to end it now. You jerk. I'm going to end it by saying this. Don't go after my character. If I borrowed somebody's car and I scratched it or banged it up, which you did, by the way, I would tell them about it. I wouldn't wait until they saw it. Okay, you jerk. So don't talk to me about personal character traits and all that stuff. Okay, I just want to end the conversation there. It's over
Hey,
now.
by the
Okay,
way, your chair is starting to bother me now a little bit.
it is.
I
Yeah,
really
just-
feel like Stein's going to
just-
fall and break his
just-
ankle.
By the way,
just a little
because
bit.
he's so
By the
high
way,
in
we
his
were
chair right now.
at O'Shea's, and I guess one of the poster people from O'Shea's is a small person, right,
Yeah.
about 3 feet tall. I got to tell you, Stein did not tower over him. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
He also didn't seem to like me too much.
Well,
either.
no, because you're a creep.
No,
that's
because
what
he's-
your that's what
he
your
wouldn't
wife
shake
told
my
me.
hand. He
Because
walked away
he's
from
a
me.
threat. He's a threat to attention.
All right, all right.
Stein says he didn't like him.
He didn't like me.
He made an immediate judgment on Stein.
Poor
Didn't
guy.
even know him.
Poor guy's got to take pictures of the people, and everyone's taking pictures with him because he's small. And Stein wants to be. Oh, thank you so much for. Thank you so. Of course, the guy's in a bad mood, just like you all day. Anyway, let's move on to this Gronk story. So Gronkowski, if you were not aware, he was on Fox New Year's Eve broadcast with Steve Harvey. He's on the stage, and he messes with this Lego set. We have some audio from this, I believe. So I want to play this. This was New Year's Eve. This is Gronkowski and Steve Harvey. Take a listen to this.
What are you doing?
That's a Lego bust of
Are
Steve
you
Harvey's
serious?
head.
I don't want to work with him no more. Why is he here? Why are you here? What is wrong with you? You're mentally imbalanced. This nut right here that broke the... You know how hard it is to get them brown Legos?
Anyway, by the way, if you want to talk about mentally imbalanced, let's talk about Steve Harvey's daughter. By the way, if you want to talk about somebody that can't drive a car and then leaves the scene of a crime. But with that being said, what do you guys make of this? Because first of all, do you think that was genuine? Do you think that was real? Do you think Steve Harvey was genuinely pissed off
Yeah.
at Gronkowski? Because it sounded to me like it was
100%.
real.
Yeah.
that was
absolutely.
real.
And I got the video up on Twitter, and you can see it. But at the same time, Steve Harvey's a great comedian. So at some point in that interaction, he kind of smirks a little bit because he's a comedian and he knows the value in it, and how absurd this is. So there's a part of him that thinks it's funny, but his initial reaction is anger. And the reason is, and you got to see this video. I mean, somebody created a bust of Steve Harvey's head out of Legos. I mean,
That's hard to do.
Work of
Yeah.
art. Someone took a lot of time to do this. Harvey was probably going to take it home with him and probably display it in his house. And Gronkowski wearing this idiotic leather helmet. He's wearing one of those old-timey football uniforms with the leather helmet and some old-timey jersey. And he just, because it's Gronkowski, when he was with the Patriots, he would spike the football really hard. That was his thing.
Yeah.
So he was doing that. So he picked up this beautiful work of art, this Lego bust, and just smashed it into 1,000 pieces on live television, and then did like a touchdown dance. So to answer your question, yeah, Harvey, he was pissed, and I would be too.
I thought that was funny, but this is Gronkowski. This is the kind of stuff he does. He does outlandish things, and this is what the guy does.
Are we really shocked that Gronkowski would do this? Gronkowski is the resident party boy of the NFL, right? That's his persona. This is what this guy is.
He does like to party.
He's the frat boy of you. Just think of everybody you go out with, the most lunatic guy that you go out with to party with. And Gronkowski's that guy.
He's the kind of guy.
There's no
he's
surprise
the kind of guy,
that he would do this.
He's the kind of guy who locked Jason Stein in his locker in high school.
Exactly.
Yeah, and he's also the kind of guy that the producers of whatever this Fox show is. Every station's got a show now. Anderson Cooper's does a thing,
Yes,
right.
and Dick Clark's Ryan Seacrest thing and all that.
By the way,
so this one's got to be pretty low on the list.
After seeing that happen and hearing that happen, I'm probably 95% certain that Rob Gronkowski suffers from CTE.
No, and then there's something like Steve Harvey says,
Wait,
you're
hold
mentally
on a second.
imbalanced.
Hold on. He
But to
knocked
Stein's
over.
point, though, it is
Guys.
it's like the fourth highest
Right,
rated.
so the producers of this
Wait,
thing, like,
hold on a
we got to
second.
get people
Stop.
to come on.
JD just said something that I completely. You're
Just
saying
prove
he's
it.
got
Go for it.
CTE because he knocked over some Legos?
When you watch
Come
the
on.
video, I think there's some evidence. There's some circumstantial evidence.
That's one of 10 or 15 things that he's
Circumstantial
that
evidence.
he's
JD, he
to
does a
make
lot
me
of
believe that.
crazy
He does
stuff like
crazy
that.
stuff on a
Yeah.
consistent basis, but he's been hitting the head how many times? I mean, he played football at a high level for 9 years, and not just 16 games. He played 20 games a year because he played the playoffs and he played the Super Bowl almost every year that he played.
I've been hitting the head before. I know you've been hitting the head before.
Not
so, I mean,
like that.
And someone made those Legos at a very,
not
very
every
high
day.
level.
Yeah, exactly.
And took the time to find the brown ones, as Steve already.
Yeah, I didn't even know that brown
Wow,
Legos
that's
were a thing,
racist.
right? Like, are those a rarity? Are those like the brown M&Ms or something? I don't know. It's hard to find.
And
Well,
Steve
the Legos are,
specifically mentioned
racist
how
Legos.
He mentioned how important the brown ones were. So I think Steve Harvey. I think he actually took that as kind of an act of racism. Maybe,
Stein, you're very.
to Steve Harvey that could have been a borderline hate crime.
Stein,
That's
I
right.
got to tell you, man, you are very Trumpish today. What I mean by that is you're not taking responsibility for anything, and then you're saying some borderline racist comments.
No,
you're very Trumpy today. Are you
no,
sure you're
I'm
not related
siding
to the
with Steve Harvey. I think it's a disgrace what happened.
No, it's not.
But some idiot producer on the Fox show said, no one's watching us on New Year's Eve. How can we spice this up a little bit? I know. We'll get
the
Gronk in here.
cat calling the kettle black?
I don't
You
think
just
Steve
called
Harvey had
somebody an
any
idiot
idea
producer.
that was coming.
You should really
And that's
just.
why his reaction was, who's this guy? Why is he here?
He was in the dark. There's no doubt, right?
right.
He had to be in the dark.
I don't know about that. It could have been staged. I'm saying probably not. I'm going to say 90% it wasn't.
Well, how long do you think it took to create that?
Oh, days, maybe a month. I don't know.
We're talking a month. You think he just wants to?
Well, you know
break
what?
that?
That's their fault because if they did a Lego
homage-
thing of you, it would have taken 30 seconds. You would.
this thing's
or
a
your
work of
penis,
art.
It would have taken 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's true. Wait,
You're
did
right.
you just
one yellow Lego. That's just one little yellow one.
yellow?
I don't know. Whatever the basic
What are
Lego
you talking
color.
about? Yellow Lego.
Didn't he say he was talking about your? Never mind. Your genitalia.
I'm thinking Gronk slid some C notes over to whoever it was that built that thing and look, this is going to be a joke.
I
thing.
hope he did that.
This is what we're
I
going
hope
to
he
do.
did that.
No, let's no,
I'll
wait.
compensate you for.
Hold on, let's go back. No. Wait, let's go back to that genitalia comment you just made.
Did
for a
I
second.
did I misunderstand what you said?
Did you just say a yellow Lego?
Yeah.
Does my skin look like it's yellow to
Like a-
you?
like-
What are
like
you
a-
talking about?
Like a Simpson character.
Does anybody know what this guy's talking
Do
about?
they have like the?
Have you lost your mind? A yellow.
I have
Le-
CTE actually.
You you've been hit too many
I
times in
I've
the
been
head.
playing
Yeah,
football at a
yeah.
very high
I
level.
also
in
clearly
my
have
off time,
CTE.
yes.
He has all those
Clearly.
concussions from
It must have been.
Appleton
It
High
must
School
have been from
football.
that car accident you got into in my car that you failed to tell
There
me
you
about.
go. It all
Yeah.
comes full circle. There you go.
It must have been that.
When he drilled that cement pole, he had his seventh concussion.
I did hit my head pretty hard. That's
By the
true.
way, I've had 3 requests in the last couple days. New Year's, they said my New Year's resolution should be make fun of you a lot more on the air.
People said that?
They find yes, three people in the last 24 hours.
Was one of them Marge?
No,
Okay,
No,
because
no.
Marge, I think, enjoyed
One of them was a
No,
friend of
Marge
mine who
wouldn't do
listens
that.
to
people
the
that
show.
are in this building.
She wouldn't play that
Okay.
game.
I'm way too nice to
The
you.
3 people that are sitting in the studio.
Let me
right
tell
now.
you
Okay,
something,
I
my
got it.
friend. No more Mr. Nice Guy to you in 2020. Okay, I'm too nice to you.
Okay.
Those days are over.
Okay.
Those days are over. All right. Well, we got to take
And
a
the
break.
show's over.
Yes, the show. Chris, see, this is. I'm nice to Chris. Chris does a good job. He doesn't sit in a high chair in the studio. All right, guys, we're going to take a 21-hour break, and we will be back at you. Sean Hannity coming up tomorrow. Everybody, have a great night. Sean Hannity coming up next.